Welcome to Northwestern Voices. Today my guest is Julie Dickie of the Northwoods Wildlife Rescue. Thanks for being here today, Julie.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
And before we get started, I'd just like to remind everybody to like and subscribe to the channel. So, Julie Dickie, I had the pleasure of hearing you speak as the program at our Rotary meeting this last Wednesday, so that was really fortuitous that I got kind of a preview of what your organization is all about. Could you tell us just a little bit about your background and your education, and sort of what you did, if anything, before you got into rescuing wild animals?
I can. It had nothing to do with animals.
Okay.
I was in law enforcement. And retired.
Oh, okay.
Then left Florida and moved to Minnesota, the opposite of normal.
Oh, really? That's really interesting. I didn't know that. Okay. So you're law enforcement in Florida?
Yes.
Aha. Okay. Anything that was it in Miami or
Tampa Bay.
Tampa Bay. Okay. What was your position there?
Well, I was there for 24 years, so I had a lot of positions. I left there and went to the feds, where I stayed 6 years.
Oh, really?
And then retired and moved here.
Wow, that is amazing. I wasn't expecting you to say that. Sorry. So you worked at FBI, or was it? Obviously, if you can't discuss it, you can't discuss it. Yeah.
It's no big secret.
Yeah.
I worked for HIDA, which is really a combination of an analyst for all of the different three-letter agencies.
Is that like high-intensity drug trafficking?
That's exactly it.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that. I don't know where I've heard that acronym before, but okay, very good. So you're out there busting drug dealers.
Well, it expanded beyond just drugs, but anything that had a nexus to drugs.
Yeah.
So there's not much that doesn't have a nexus to drugs.
And were you an analyst for them?
I was an intelligence analyst for them.
All right. And so what does that entail?
Gathering intelligence, putting intelligence together, deconflicting so that two agencies weren't, investigating each other instead of a bad guy. Okay.
It's like coordinating informants and stuff like that too, and knowing that so you're not stepping on each other's toes?
Well, it was more coordinating investigations so that, like I said, you didn't end up, the bad guys all being cops.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. Any particularly high profile cases that you could discuss that you worked on?
Probably not.
Okay. Well, that's really interesting. So gosh, we could do a whole podcast on that, but maybe we'll do that another time. So then you made the absolutely insane decision to move from a beautiful area like Tampa and come to this Arctic tundra wasteland.
It's beautiful here.
I'm being facetious. As I know, it is beautiful here, and I love it here too. But yeah, you said most people go the other way.
Normal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the connection to this area?
My husband grew up here.
I see. Okay. And are you originally from Florida or this area? Or
I was a military brat.
Okay.
I didn't really get it from.
All over the place. All right. So how did he talk you into to coming up here?
What
were some of the arguments that he made? Like here's the pros and here's the cons. Con number one, it can be 100 degrees below zero if you consider the wind chill. Okay. All right. So what pros counterbalance that?
It wasn't a hard sell.
No?
No.
Okay. Yeah. Just like having probably fewer people and, the fresh air and
way less traffic, fewer people. It's beautiful. And there's lots of wildlife.
Yep.
So it's all good.
So who, as between you and your husband, who had the passion for wildlife, or was it kind of something that you both had?
Well, that would definitely be me. He's a very patient man.
Yeah. Okay. So, how did you where did you develop this interest, or when?
In law enforcement, there weren't many women in law enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, I think I was like the 8th woman hired on Tampa Police Department. So that ages me a bit. But every child type case, every rape case, and every animal case, they, of course, gave to the women because, well, that's just what they thought was the right thing to do.
Okay, yeah.
So I ended up, everybody that had an injured animal of any kind or an animal call of any kind, they came to me.
Yeah.
So I ended up with all these injured animals at my house. So that's kind of how it got started.
Interesting. And I suppose it's Florida, so there's probably quite a few, like, did you ever have to deal with any sort of exotic pets that people had? Like, you know, I remember, because I used to live in New York, and I remember there was a story at one time that was in the newspapers about a guy who had kept a tiger in his apartment.
We did run into things like that.
Yeah.
That would be way beyond anything. I mean, I could go and secure the tiger.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to raise a tiger. Just secure it to the point where everybody's safe.
Uh-huh. And are there gators up that far?
In Florida?
Mm-hmm.
Every pond.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, they're everywhere.
So did you ever have to deal with...
Several times.
Yep. And, I mean, we've all seen videos of people like wrestling alligators and things like that, but I suppose that's probably not a one-person job when it comes to...
Well, there's a difference between showmanship and actually trying to control a wild animal.
So what are some of those differences?
Well, not videotaping yourself or somebody doing it would be key. Yes, several people. Safety is obviously the key, and the big fallacy there is that when they wrestle those alligators, they're all moving them somewhere else safe, and they're not. You know, they're probably euthanizing them and becoming boots and handbags and things like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's not exactly as it appears on TV.
When you were doing this down in Florida, did it sort of become your mission to safely release them when they were down there too, or was there a different protocol that you had to follow?
I didn't raise them, so if we could relocate them, that was great.
Yeah.
If not, I turned them over. The zoo in Tampa is really, really good, and I would turn them over to them, and what they did with them, that was up to them.
Okay.
With any of the exotic animals.
Yeah, yeah. I heard because I go down to Fort Myers just about every year because of the spring training for the Twins is down there. Yeah, yeah. But my friend's dad's got a place down there. We always stay with him, and he always talks about these snake problems that they have down there. They're apparently, like, during a hurricane or something, some snakes got loose and it caused them to sort of propagate throughout the state, and that, you know, there had been authorization for all of these, like, snake hunts and stuff like that. Do you know anything about any of that?
I think you're probably thinking about pythons.
Yes, yes.
And the real problem with them was not that there was a storm and they escaped. People would raise them as pets, thinking, oh, this will be cool and fun. It's not so cool and fun when they get big.
Yeah.
And so then they release them, and then they have lots and lots and lots of baby snakes.
Yep.
And they become a real problem. They start killing everything. So that's probably the snakes you're talking about. Although Florida has its fair share of snakes.
Yeah, I think I am talking about pythons because yeah, like, I remember he was saying that some of these things can get to be so huge, and then you know, it's sort of like an annual event. They have a snake hunt, and it must be a python hunt then.
Yes, mostly down in the Everglade area, I think. And yeah, they can get to be, I'm not a snake person, but 20 to 28 feet long, I think. They could certainly eat just about any person or animal out there.
Did anybody ever ask you to deal with a snake like that when you were working in law enforcement?
We would get calls occasionally for those.
Yeah.
Generally, we would call animal control.
Yeah. Okay.
And let them deal with it.
Right. And a lot of times that probably involves euthanizing the snake rather than...
I don't know. They would capture it. What they did with it after they captured it, I don't know.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, but so you were kind of assigned these animal complaints, and then you sort of developed a skill in caring for the animals and things like that, or...
Well, what happened is you have to be licensed to have possession of the animals. So I had to take the tests and do all the paperwork to get licensed.
Yeah.
And then it was like opening a door and all the animals came in.
Yeah.
Till finally my husband kind of put his foot down and said, they're taking over our house.
This was in Florida.
This was in Florida.
Yeah. Uh-huh. So what kind of animals did you have in your house?
Actually, inside the house, none.
Yeah.
But, on the property.
Yeah.
Mostly rabbits, foxes, birds, all kinds of birds, smaller animals.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you must have developed sort of a passion for caring for these animals.
There's probably not a better feeling than taking something that wouldn't have survived, getting it healthy enough to let it go in the wild and know that there's a really good chance it's going to be fine.
Yeah, it's really satisfying.
It is a very, very good feeling.
Okay, so when did you move to Minnesota?
About 11 and a half years ago.
And you came up to this area. This is the Park Rapids area, Minnesota. And did you get involved in wildlife rescue almost as soon as you got here, or did you come up here with a plan that you were going to do that here, or how did you get involved up in Minnesota?
I came up with a plan that I was not going to get involved in.
Okay.
That was our plan. My husband was actually in Afghanistan. So I was here by myself.
So he was a military man.
Department of Defense.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And a conservation officer showed up at our house and said they were there because some neighbors had complained about bears in the area, and they wondered if we'd seen bears. And they were laughing because there were 2 bears sleeping on our driveway. And I said, well, I don't have a problem with bears. They like the warm asphalt. Didn't bother me. And we laughed about it and got to talking. And then they found out prior law enforcement, and then the wildlife rescue came up, and they're like, you've got to do that. There's nobody around here doing that.
So just on a chance?
Just on this chance encounter. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
No, not going to do that.
Did you have the acreage for it? Or like the property?
We do have property.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing led to another, and before you knew it, there were more conservation officers going, we're going to have to kill these animals if you don't do this. Just for us, can you do it?
Oh, that's not fair.
Can you just, you don't have to take them from the public, just from us. So I said, fine.
That is not
I'll take
fair.
the tests. I'll do the paperwork. I'll get it done.
Yeah.
And then it just exploded.
So that was the creation of Northwoods Wildlife Rescue.
Yes.
Which is a 501c3.
It is a 501c3.
So when you say take the test and get the license and everything like that, what does that process entail?
It's a pretty long process, and it's good and bad. There would be more rehabbers if it weren't such a long process. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, there are people just wanting to help animals isn't necessarily the right person. That you need to have somebody that understands that the goal is to let them go, not make them pets.
Right.
And so that becomes really hard. So there's a lot of interviews and tests and studying and such to make sure they're trying to get the right people doing it.
Yeah. And who conducts those interviews?
The DNR.
So it's a state DNR.
It is a state DNR.
And do they come to your house, or do you go to them, or how does that like?
A little combination of both.
Mm-hmm.
They do inspections of the facility on a regular basis. And then of course the DNR brings animals to me on a very regular basis.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And do you get any sort of like grants or funding from the state?
We get no funding, no government funding at all.
None.
None.
Okay. So they just
they control the license.
The license, and that's it.
That's it.
Do you have to pay for the license?
You do.
So you're actually losing.
That's part
of. So you pay for the privilege of having them dump animals on you, basically.
No, I pay for the privilege of saving little animals' lives.
I know, but I'm just saying from a purely monetary viewpoint, it doesn't seem like a very good deal for you.
No, the DNR definitely wins.
Yeah.
In that deal. Mm-hmm. But so do the animals.
Well, yeah, I mean, the animals are what's important to you, obviously. So, but I'm just saying, it seems like it's you're doing them a great service. They ought to at least give you some sort of a stipend or something every time that they drop off an animal, you'd think, to pay for the food or whatever the case may be.
Well, they don't have the funding for it.
They don't have the funding for it either. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll get into your funding, and we'll talk about that. I know you got a couple of things coming up this year yet, as far as fundraisers are concerned, and we'll talk about those too. So, Okay, so give us an example of sort of a common scenario of when you guys would get involved with an animal here up in this area.
We get animals from the public, and we get them from the DNR, from local law enforcement. So we get them from a variety of places. We used to go out on every call. We can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You know, there's just too many animals, and they have to be fed so often that somebody thinks, well, I'm only 2 hours away. And it's like, by the time I get there and back, that's 4 hours, and I've missed 3 feedings. Yeah. So, we just can't. And it breaks my heart when somebody says, well, I'm in War Road, and I have an injured eagle. And I'm like, if you can get it to us, that's fine. But I can't drive to War Road and pick it up.
Right.
So that's a hard part of it.
Yeah. So let's say you're in, I'm in War Road. I've got an injured eagle, and I say, Julie, what do I do? You say, bring it to me. I say, well, how do I do that? What do you tell me?
What we try to do is have volunteers that we can shuttle it. And depending on the injury, it won't stay with me either. It'll go down to the Raptor Center or to Garrison, which is wild and free. They have veterinarians on staff. I'm not a veterinarian. So if it needs a veterinarian beyond something reasonably basic, we'll keep shuttling it. It'll be like that little game of hopscotch, if you will. We'll get somebody, okay, well, from War Road, can you get it to wherever? Yeah. And then I get somebody there, can you get it to, just follow the map down, and then we take care of them that way.
Okay. But I mean, just like practically speaking, I'm saying, Julie, I've never handled an eagle or any kind of a wild bird or whatever. Like, how do I pick it up? Like, where do I put it in the car? Like, what do you tell me?
Well, we'd hate to give away all the secrets.
Yeah, sure.
Eagles are not aggressive animals, actually. When somebody is on the phone, I can usually talk them through how to safely capture it.
I see.
And we don't want people just going out and capturing eagles.
No, I mean,
but we do. We can talk them through safely. And a cardboard box is very often the most practical transport method, because then when you are hopscotching it down,
pick up the box.
Pick up the box, and nobody has to try and move it from kennel to kennel, or, oh, gee, that's my favorite kennel.
Yeah.
And then I have to explain, but you really need to clean it well before you put your domestic animal in that
back
kennel
in
now.
It, because of stuff like the distemper and mange.
There's just all kinds of things that they can get.
I think when you were talking the other day, you mentioned that there's a huge difference, of course, between a wild animal, or the psychology of a wild animal versus the psychology of a domestic animal. And a wild animal, I think one of the things you said is that it always wants to get away, right?
Right.
So, just the thought of approaching a wild animal that's really wanting to get away, and may be injured is probably pretty daunting to some people.
Well, sure. And to the animal.
Yeah, I mean, it's, of course, the animal's scared, the person's scared, everybody's, the animal doesn't know that the person's trying to help the animal, and the person's not sure that the animal's going to attack him, right? So,
well, and we talk about things like making eye contact. Well, predators make eye contact. That's a predatory thing. So we tell people, when you go to capture that eagle, don't make eye contact with it. Don't be staring into its face. Yeah. If it's in a kennel or in a containment area, don't go up and try talking to it. Talking to it's terrifying it. Don't stare at it. That's terrifying it. So little things like that people just don't think about. Yeah. But what we think of as we're being soothing, and we're talking to it and calming it down. And it's like, no, we're terrifying it.
Yeah, because that's sort of the way that we, like, if we have a dog or a cat, it's going to be okay, good boy, but it's not a completely different psychology to a wild animal.
Correct.
Yeah. So you're better off sort of just coming off as being more nonchalant in your demeanor?
Yes, and as least threatening as you can possibly be. And when we're feeding, like mostly the raptors, when we're feeding the animals, you stand to the side of the kennel, so all they see are the tongs. They don't see the person with the tongs in their hand. They see the tongs. And that way they're not associating people with those food. We can also use puppets I call them puppets. They're stuffed animals, basically, that mock whatever animal it is, and you run the tongs up through the animal. so that it's in front of the cage.
Oh.
You know, and your hand is in there like a hand puppet, which all sounds really goofy, but it does work.
Yeah.
And then we can feed them that way.
You're talking about feeding raptors,
mostly raptors,
birds
and
of prey,
like
kind of things like that. Okay. And so, what do you feed like an eagle when it's in temporary captivity?
Chicken. Mm-hmm. They like chicken. They like venison. Mm-hmm. They like groundhogs or gophers.
Mm-hmm. So you have to do a lot of hunting, I suppose, then to be able to get all this food.
You know, we got really lucky in that this young man, an entrepreneur of about, I don't know, 10 or 12 years old, was shooting gophers, trapping gophers. And he would give me the carcasses because all he needed was the feet to get the reward. Yeah. So he would give me the carcasses. And unfortunately, he's gotten older now and he's into other things. Yeah. So I need another entrepreneur.
Is that where you keep the meat in the freezer and stuff like that?
We do. Well, it's not just the meat; it's the whole gopher. They need the hair, they need the bones.
Oh, they do.
They need it all. Think about what they do in the wild. Yeah, they eat all of that.
So you need another young boy to go out with a .22 and shoot gophers or trap them.
Trap them. Trap them. Better than shoot them.
Okay. I know a few boys like that. Maybe I'll put them in touch with you and see if I can help you out with that one.
The only people that would object are the gophers.
Well, they're so plentiful, I suppose, right? That it doesn't really, because they say like hunting stuff like grouse doesn't really affect the population of them because there's just so many of them, and that's what people think about. Okay, so you'll get a call. Somebody's got an animal in distress. They'll somehow get it to you. And if it doesn't need a vet's attention, what happens next?
Depends on the animal. If we get a lone, fill in the blank, an animal that is used to being in a group, community type animal, and we have a lone one, then we check with the other rehabbers to see if somebody else maybe has another one that's the same age, and then we can put them together like a fox. Yeah. A little fox kit needs other fox kits. They need to grow up with other fox kits so they know how to be a fox. So we'll ask around with all the other rehabbers, hey, do you have any fox kits? Or they'll call me, hey, do you have any? We marry them together to try and lump them together. So we move them around. Okay.
And I mean, how many rehabbers are there in the state?
Not many. It's on the DNR website. Unfortunately, the list is not necessarily up to date. Some of the people on there it's very expensive and they've just quit doing it, or they can only take in a small number of animals. Yeah. We're probably in the middle-sized range for a rehab facility. Garrison, which is Wild and Free in Garrison, Minnesota, is one of the larger. There's Wildwoods in Duluth, and there's a center in St. Cloud. And then down in the cities, you've got the WRC and the Raptor Center. That's about it.
Really? So there's a need for more of this type of work, you would think, right?
There's definitely a need for that. It's just really hard to fill that need.
Yeah, because you need such a special sort of, of time availability, not needing to be paid for it, and then having the property and the willingness to work with these animals. It really does take a special kind of person to do something like that.
It takes unique scenarios, yes.
Okay, so the other day you were talking a lot about fawns. It seems like fawns is something that comes up over and over again for you, would you say? Yeah.
They've really limited the number of rehabbers that can rehab fawns. Just because you're a rehabber doesn't mean you can rehab every kind of animal. Yeah. Specifically your license has to have an exemption on it for fawns. So there's only, I think, 4 places right now in Minnesota where you can take fawns, where people can take fawns. And we can't take fawns from CWD areas. Oh. So, I mean, nobody can. So
that's chronic wasting disease, right?
That is chronic wasting disease. And the logic there is we don't want to take in a fawn here from a chronic wasting area and then release it and spread that. Yeah. So, but that's heartbreaking when you have to tell somebody, no, we can't take that fawn.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's situations like, I don't know, like you hear stories, people saying that, have you ever, in whatever is usually the spring where the fawn is just kind of sitting there and the mother goes off to find food or something, and it's really not lost or in distress or anything. It's just there because this mother left it there, and you could just walk right up to it and pick it up or what, I mean.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but
and we say, please don't.
Yeah, don't do that. So you mentioned that there were some telltale signs as to whether or not a fawn might be in distress versus just being left temporarily for the mother to find food.
Absolutely. And she'll leave it for up to 24 hours. So people think it's abandoned, and it's not. Especially, she can have twins, or with a winter like this, you could have triplets. Mm-hmm. And they could all survive. She's not going to bed all three of them down together. So she's splitting her time between 3 different babies in 3 somewhat close, but not the same location. So just because the fawn's there does not mean it's abandoned. Mm-hmm. If you don't see mom or know mom was killed, then the fawn is probably fine. The telltale signs, the biggest thing and easiest thing is their ears. When fawns get dehydrated, the first thing that happens is their ears start curling. So if the tips of their ears are straight,
curling forward like this,
like the very tip of the ear will just curl, and you can see that it's very obvious. Where if you look at, like, I'm trying to think of I think mostly dogs, their ears stand straight up, and they're not curled at the ends. Same thing. The fawns, if their ears are curled, they're probably in distress. If they're not curled up, if they're splayed out, I'm not sure how to describe it. If the arms and legs are all 4 legs are straight out and they're laying and breathing heavily, they're probably in distress because they don't typically do that. They curl up. Mm-hmm. If there's a bunch of flies or insects around, that's a sign that something's not right. That means it hasn't moved and it's probably excreted there, and the flies are coming for the excretion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you, generally speaking, is this in the springtime when the fawns are born, or when are those fawns usually born?
The majority in June and July.
Okay.
They can be as early as May and as late as August.
And how much time does a fawn need to develop with its mother before it's considered to be a full-grown doe or buck?
They stay with their mother through the first year. Mm-hmm. Usually. I mean, unless something happens to the mom or a buck comes along and chases them away. Mom will usually chase them away before rut because she doesn't want the males to come around her babies. So she'll chase them away. The boys will just go off on their own to find girls. Mm-hmm. We kind of use the easy guide of once their spots are gone, they don't need mom anymore.
Okay.
So that's just, it's not scientific, but that's just kind of the guide that we use is when their spots fade away.
So if they're born in June and July, and the hunting season is usually like in the second week of November or something like, or the rifle hunting season, is the fawn at 4 to 5 months old at that point capable of self-sufficiency, or do you run into a lot of situations where the fawn needs care and attention because the mother has been shot?
The problem we run into with that, a fawn that's born in June would be okay. Yeah. If mom got shot, it would survive. Yeah, more than likely. If the fawn was born in August, it's probably not going to survive without mom.
Okay.
So, but the problem is catching it. If you shot mom, catching that fawn would be near impossible because they're really fast.
Yeah, yeah.
At that point, he would be old enough to run, and it would run. So they're hard to catch.
So if a person shoots a doe, they're also potentially taking out another fawn, unfortunately, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So let that be a lesson to all of us hunters.
Hunters are some of the most conservation-minded people that I've run into.
Right, yeah.
I get an awful lot of animals. There's a concrete company here in town. They were out hunting together and found a wounded eagle.
Oh.
Now, they had been out hunting for hours, gotten up early, gone out hunting, found this eagle, stopped their hunting, got in their vehicle, drove all the way down to me to bring me this injured eagle. And, to me, that's an example of they did what was right for the animals. So I have all the respect in the world for the hunters that are responsible.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I deer hunt myself too, so
My husband
I'm
does
saying
too.
that kind of like tongue in cheek, but it is kind of you don't really think about it. You think, oh, I got a doe tag. That means I can shoot a doe. Well, okay,
but maybe look and see if she's got babies with her.
Yeah,
and if those babies still have spots, please, please, please don't take that doe.
Yeah. Okay. Good to know. Okay, so we talked about fawns. Well, you did say that the only time you've ever been injured doing this was had to do with a fawn. Right?
Yes. It's kind of embarrassing. We deal with bobcats and fishers and all kinds of animals that bite, and the only time that I've been sent to urgent care was a fawn.
Yeah. Was it just the hoof caught you? Or?
The hoof got me.
Yeah.
And it was just that it was panicking.
Yeah.
And it
they're
got
sharp.
me. They're very, very sharp. 9 stitches worth of sharp, pretty much.
Wow, it's amazing. A question I always have too, and maybe you know something about this, is when it gets to be so bitterly cold. I'm not talking about this winter, but I mean, how in the world do these animals survive when it gets to be 20, 30 degrees below zero out there?
It amazes me, especially some of the little ones.
Yeah.
It amazes me too. But their coats change. They get their winter coat, and they instinctively know where to hide. Now, when we start taking away those hiding places, that probably makes it way more difficult for them. And that's why people, when you've got that fox that's living under your heated garage, that's probably why it's under there, is it's found a source of heat. So if it's not bothering anybody, maybe we can let it stay there, because then at least it gets a little heat off of that building.
Yeah.
So they find ways.
So you talked about foxes just then. What about things like coyotes? I mean, coyotes, the state considers them to be vermin,
nuisance animals.
Nuisance animals, shoot them on sight, shoot them at night, all that kind of stuff. Do you ever have any interactions with the coyotes?
We've had people bring us injured coyotes. Typically, they've been hit by cars. Okay. And they're injured enough that they need a veterinarian. And we take those to either Garrison or to the WRC down in the cities.
Okay. So it's not like you say, oh, it's a vermin or nuisance coyote. We're not going to take care of it.
No, people bring us porcupines, which is another nuisance animal.
Yeah.
And we're not going to turn anything away.
Yeah.
They're all God's creatures, and we'll do whatever we can for them.
Yeah. Okay. And so as far as the interactions, like, you mentioned, with dogs, like for people who own domestic dogs and stuff like that, like they'll go out and, they'll find some fox scat or something like that. And, like that, because they have, they're prone to stuff like distemper and things like that. Like, do you have any sort of advice as far as for dog owners to avoid this type of thing happening to their dogs?
Well, absolutely get it vaccinated for distemper. Rabies and distemper both. They should get those vaccines for their domestic dogs.
Oh, yeah.
I understand dogs run in the woods, and that's fine. If dogs run in the woods when the fawns are little fawns, they will kill the fawns.
Oh, they will.
So we ask people, we know June is when all the fawns are being born, June and July.
Yeah.
We've all seen the little fawns. When they're born, they can't walk. They try to stand up, and it's just sweet, but hard to watch. They obviously can't outrun a dog.
Yeah.
So if people are going to let their dogs run, be mindful of the fact that if there are deer near, they could be injuring those deer. Back to the distemper, with foxes, when the fox dies, dogs, for whatever reason, they roll on the scat and they roll on the dead carcass. That's just what dogs do. So bathe them. Yeah. I would suggest to the owners keep bathing your dog well. Yeah. And the distemper shot.
Do you guys own any dogs?
We do not.
No.
And I want to. I love dogs.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not fair for domestic animals.
Yeah.
because they can't be around the wild animals. And it certainly wouldn't be fair to the wild animals to have dogs running up to their enclosures. So we don't have any dogs or cats.
It'd be impossible to prevent a dog from doing that, dogs being so curious.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What about bears? Yeah, it was something that I don't think you got too in depth on yesterday, or Wednesday when you spoke. But what sort of encounters have you had with bears over the years? We
will rescue cubs. We have trapped some adult bears to help the DNR. We work with the DNR on that. The adult bears, for the most part, people will call us because they've got an injured paw, or they're limping, or they see a cut on their side. Generally, leave them alone. A bear can live just fine. Even if it loses one of its paws, it'll be fine. So our general advice about adult bears is we would do more damage trying to capture it than just leaving it alone.
Yeah. What do you know about the bear populations around here? I mean, have they been increasing, decreasing, staying the same?
People have asked us if there's more bears because they seem to be seeing more bears. I'm not sure that's true. I think maybe what's happening is we've cut down an awful lot of woods. So the habitat that the bears were living in, if you had 100 bears living in that habitat, but now you shrunk that habitat in half, that same 100 bears is going to look like 200 because people are seeing them at their houses.
Oh, yeah.
So I think that maybe, but that's not scientific.
Isn't there some organization out there called... I want to call it it's called like the Wildlife Fund or something like that. That's going around and buying up forested land in the state just for conservation and for the habitat to increase.
I think that would be wonderful. I'm not familiar with it, but I think that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Okay, and I mean, are there any sort of safety precautionary measures that you have to take if you're trying to capture a bear, even if it is a cub? I would imagine the thing could still be
They're
pretty
incredibly
ferocious.
Strong.
Yeah. Like tranquilizers or anything?
We don't use tranquilizers. The problem with tranquilizers is, in the movies, it's instantaneous. Boy, you tranquilize them and
you shoot them with a little dart.
In real life, it doesn't work that way.
Oh.
That's why we don't tranquilize deer. Because if we shot a dart at a deer, and it takes off running, when you hunt,
you got to track it. It
takes off running.
Yeah.
Well, now you've got a deer that's been tranquilized and it's taken off, and if you don't find it, but somebody shoots that and eats it, now you've just tranquilized people. So
I didn't think about it like that.
So we don't tranquilize wild animals unless we can control the animal, and we know that we can control the animal.
You control first, then tranquilize.
Correct. That's exactly what we do.
Okay. And I suppose that the same thing would go there for all wild animals, not just the big ones like bears and deer. So you mentioned that you deal with all the different kinds of animals. We talked about avian mammals. Somewhat we touched on reptiles. So you'll do things like turtles and stuff like that.
We do.
And I thought that was a really cool fact that you mentioned, was that if somebody comes across a turtle and the shell is like broken and it looks like, oh boy, this turtle must be a goner. You said something about that's not necessarily true, right? No,
they heal remarkably well as long as we can get... Infection is what kills them, not the broken shell, typically. So if we can get antibiotics into them right away, a few weeks and they're fine.
Yeah. So I find a turtle on the side of the road that looks like that. So then I would say, oh, I know who to call on this. And I look at my card here and it's got your telephone number and all that, or your email. Would that be the best thing to do, is just to call this number?
Absolutely.
And that's 218-616-2176.
That's the number.
Yeah. And then you would give me instructions on what to do with the animal that I found and everything else like that.
Yes.
Okay. The last one that was on that list was aquatic animals. So what kind of aquatic animals do you deal with?
Well, aquatic birds.
Aquatic birds. Okay.
All the ducks and the swans and the geese and the herons and egrets and all those birds.
Yeah.
I've never had anybody bring me a fish.
I was gonna ask you about a fish.
I've not had anyone bring me a fish.
I got this fish.
Well, other than food for the otters. Yeah, lots of people bring me fish for that.
I've got an injured fish. Okay, so let's see. Chronic wasting disease. You mentioned it. There's only been one case in Hubbard
that I know of.
Okay. What about in the neighboring counties? Like
none in Wadena that I'm aware of. There's one between here and Brainerd, and I think that's probably Crow Wing County.
Okay.
And I'm not positive on that. There was one case there.
Oh.
So we've had, spottings of cases around us, but fortunately none right here.
What about Beltrami or Cass or anything like that? Nothing like that?
Beltrami has had cases. I don't know about Cass.
Okay. And what are some of the telltale signs? I mean, have you ever been brought a fawn or a deer that looks like it's been suffering from that?
No. Mostly because of fawn.
Yeah.
I don't know that they have any cases where fawns have actually contracted it.
Yeah.
They don't know if they can contract it from their mom. Most of the fawns that we get are hours, maybe days old. Yeah. So we've never had trouble with it here.
Yeah. So, I mean, but have you been trained on what to look for?
Yes, it's very apparent. Sadly, it's very, very apparent. They look like, what are those zombies that people talk about? I mean, they just look like walking bones.
Oh, yeah. That's terrible. Is there any idea, does anybody know what causes that?
What's better, Ford or Chevy?
Yeah.
Everybody has an opinion.
Right.
I don't know that anybody knows for sure. What I mean, the chemistry of it is they can't process the food, so they don't get any nutrition at all. They just starve. They're basically starving to death.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. What about wolves? Have you ever had any sort of has anybody ever brought you an injured wolf or any other experiences with wolves?
They have. Unfortunately, under my license, I'm not licensed for wolves.
Okay.
I don't know that there's anybody other than a wolf center up in Duluth.
And there's one in Ely, too. The International Wolf Center there.
Right.
Yeah.
I think they're probably, and that's who I was thinking of, Duluth, Ely, up in that area.
Yeah.
I think they're probably the only people that can have captive wolves.
Yeah.
So I would not be able to, I can get it stable, and then we need to get it somewhere. Now, we can send it out of state if we have somebody out of state willing to take it.
Yeah.
So
are there wolves in this area?
There are definitely wolves in this area.
And I mean, you just anecdotally or based on anything that you've looked at, have you, because there's one of those, you mentioned, everybody's got an opinion on this and everybody's got an opinion on that. Well, one of the things they have an opinion on is whether or not wolves are actually endangering the deer population, especially, in areas where people like to hunt, and, they blame their lack of success at the hunt on wolves. Do you have any kind of an opinion or thought on that?
It seems like every time we try to mess with nature, we screw things up. So I think nature kind of handles itself.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, years and years and years ago, we didn't control the wolf population and we still had deer. So I don't know why now that would change, other than there's been a habitat change. So I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard because, a lot of people really do blame wolves and say wolves they've been moving from the east over into the west now because apparently, like out in the Arrowhead, the deer population is so low that they have to keep coming in this direction. And then, there's a push to have a wolf hunt, and then that's met with opposition from all the various wolf advocacy groups and things like that. And it's really becoming kind of a hot topic in this state.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, you in your brochure, I noticed that there are volunteer opportunities available with your organization. So how does that work, and what ages do you accept, and what kind of things would a volunteer in your organization be looking at doing?
Oh, there's lots of opportunities. Anyone under 18 can't be around the animals, so you have to be 18 or older to interact with the animals.
Yeah.
And we really try to limit the number of volunteers that interact with the animals, only because we don't want them used to people.
Yeah.
You know, so if I have, like we have a particular fawn that has major injuries, I may pick 2 volunteers and go, that's your fawn. And those will be the only 2 people. Even I don't interact with that fawn unless it becomes medically necessary. Because then that exposure to people is limited to at least those 2 people.
Yeah.
So there's the animals. We have one lady, Bridget, who cleans our portable kennels. She does better than I ever did. And she comes, twice a week and she cleans kennels.
Yeah.
And that's that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
We have volunteers that clean the stalls for the fawns, which is just basically like this horse stalls is what they are, and they need to be cleaned out. We have volunteers for transportation. My website is pretty pathetic because fortunately I can do a lot with animals, but when you start getting technology, I'm not there. That's not my forte.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so, we look for volunteers to help with the website or to help with the fundraisers. We certainly need volunteers to do that too. And building cages, building release cages, building actual enclosures at our facility. So there's lots of volunteer opportunities.
Is there anything that, say a high school age kid could do? I mean, obviously not dealing with the animals, but I mean, do you have high school volunteers? And
I do.
Like people are working on Boy Scout projects or other just community service opportunities and things like that?
A few years ago, in fact, a young man was working on his Eagle Scout project.
Yeah.
And he built, I think, about 20 Merlin release platforms for us, which was phenomenal, although we're down to like 2 now. So little things like that are huge things for us.
Yeah, yeah. And they would just contact you either on your telephone number or email here, and if they're interested in doing something like that, they could.
Absolutely. We can give them the specifications for what we need, and they can build away. Yeah.
All right. And so let's talk about some of the you've got a couple of fundraisers coming up yet this year. The first one here is a spring cleaning, and it looks like an annual event that was started a couple of years ago.
Last year.
Okay. And it's a garage sale fundraiser.
Correct.
So what is that about?
We did the first one last year because somebody said, hey, we should do a garage sale. It was a lot of work. And when we got done with the garage sale, it was like, we're never going to do this again. And the next day, everybody was like, oh, no, we need to do this again.
Yeah.
It was very successful. We had a great time.
Yeah.
It will be May 23rd to May 25th at the Hubbard First Response Building in town. And the week before that, we'll take drop-offs there. And
so that's at 1100 Birch Avenue, Park Rapids. You'll accept drop-offs for the sale from May 18th to May 22nd from 10 to 3, it looks like, right?
That's correct.
Okay, and all those would then be sold. The proceeds would go towards your organization, which is wonderful. The second one I have here is you're having a dinner, and that's going to be on Friday, August 9th, 2024 at the Legion. And that'll be from 5 to 7:30. The cost would be $15 for adults and $10 for kids 8 and under. And it's going to be a supper of smoked pork, cheesy potatoes, coleslaw, and dessert. So it also talks about silent auctions and raffles. So what else is going on at that event?
Well, I realized just now that I left the baked beans off of here.
Oh,
and I should have put that on there.
Was it your husband's a good cook? Is that it? Yeah.
The first year, this will be our 3rd time. The first time we did it, he was terrified because he smoked 300 pounds of pork shoulder. And he's like, what if I don't get it right?
Yeah.
One of the TV shows that does the barbecue places, they were here for the Legends and Logging competition.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, oh, no pressure.
Yeah.
Because they came.
They did.
And
did they give him some tips?
Well, they were very kind. They actually offered to do the smoking.
Oh.
But they said the beans would win their competitions. So after it was over,
it's the most important thing. It's not on the fly.
That's exactly it. That's why I said I can't believe I left the beans off of there because everybody liked those beans.
Yeah. Well, that'll be a great event. So
it will. And anybody that has any silent auction items or items we can put in raffle baskets, we're good with that.
Is there gonna be a speaker there or anything, or is it just basically just gonna be a dinner?
It'll be a dinner, and last year we had Charlie. I don't know if there's a name to his band, but he does performances around town here.
Oh,
Charlie Wagner, and he performed the whole evening.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll have time to do that this year or not, but he may. And we may have a surprise visit from a creature of some sort if we, have that opportunity.
I was going to ask because, what was the name of that guy? He used to come on Johnny Carson with all the wild animals. And,
I do know who you're talking about.
I don't remember his name, but anyway, I was wondering if somebody from your organization was going to come in and do something.
See, the problem we have, because we'll have some cute animals at that time.
Yeah.
The problem is we want them to be wild animals.
Right.
So taking them in a room full of people that are eating pork, probably not a good idea for the animal. Yeah. And we do have to put the animal's best interest at heart. But if we have an educational animal, like the pine marten that we talked about at the thing that was tamed, that now lives at the Minnesota Zoo, I could have brought her.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Anything else you wanted to add about your organization that you feel is important?
Just that we're so happy to be able to help as much wildlife as we can. I feel terrible if somebody calls and I can't help them.
Yeah.
Because we just can't. It's just my husband and I, and we're volunteers. Yeah. And then, our friends and neighbors that I'd like to keep as friends. And I don't want to be that neighbor that, nobody wants to walk past our house. So, sometimes we have to say no, and that's hard. Yeah.
And this all comes from a real genuine place of love for these animals. And I just think it's just very commendable. We're glad to have people like you in our community. So thank you.
Well, I'm glad to be in this community.
So the last question I have for you is, what advice would you give to a young person? Just life advice, general advice.
Do what makes you happy. Find things that you have a passion for, and follow those dreams.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you again, Julie Dickie. You've been a really great guest. And, remember that those events are going to be in May. May 23rd to 25th will be the garage sale at the First Response Building. And then Friday, August 9th, 2024, there'll be the Legion dinner with the smoked pork and the smoked beans. So, again, thank you for being here, Julie. It's been great. And also, like and subscribe to the podcast. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, both of you.
All right.